And hello again, dear ones. Reverend Robert with you here.
Rev Z right here.
And we have a very, very special guest with us today on New Thought Today. This is the Right Reverend Cindy Grimes. Hello, Reverend Cindy. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, we are so happy that you are here. And folks, we're going to fill you in as we go along. Reverend Cindy is an amazing light in the world. I first became aware of her, well, it's probably been going on almost 6 months now since we first introduced, I think. And every time I turn around, I'm learning more and more and more about the amazing things this being does in the world. And we had the beautiful experience to hang out together in Big Sky a couple weeks ago, and you're broadcasting on the network, and it's a little overdue for me to introduce you to my friend Reverend Elzia, because you'll see, folks, these two have about a billion intersections of where I'm surprised actually that the two of you have never met until this time. So we're really excited to have you on board. Z, how you been?
Oh, been well, man. Just fall is in the air over here in Colorado, man. I woke up this morning, it's 41 degrees, and I was like, ooh, I slept with the window open, and that was a mistake. But other than that, everything's well, and just, trying to keep the spirit moving.
Exactly. We're overdue for our first snowfall in the city at this point. End of September, and there's been no snowfall in the city. We're a little overdue this year. And River City, now you're in Florida, so you're probably having a totally different experience than that.
Oh, yeah. Today it's cool. It's only 85. And the humidity is probably just 90%. A very different experience here.
Wonderful. Well, welcome again. Welcome to New Thought Today. Folks, if you're watching and this is your first time with us, here's what we're all about. New Thought Today is an idea, an opportunity to take a look at how this New Thought philosophy is presenting itself out in the world, how we can take these not so ancient belief systems and this philosophy and make it active in our lives and bring it into the world today. And that's one of the things I'm so excited to have Reverend Cindy with us, because not only are you the senior minister at the Center for Spiritual Living, not only are you a coach and an author and this and that and all the wonderful things you get to do, but really the work you're doing that I think is incredibly important and seems to be at the forefront of what you're doing is work in the restorative justice and peace building world. And that's why we've got you on today. So we'd love to give you just a couple of minutes to introduce yourself, tell the world a little bit about your work, and then we're going to let Reverend Elzia share some of the intersections you all share together.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you. Like, where do I start? I am the senior minister at the Center for Spiritual Living in Ocala, Florida, which is North Central Florida. And we have a wonderful little location. My phone is ringing, and it's just going to let it keep ringing because it's not near me. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, so Center for Spiritual Living is my main gig. And then I am also starting a nonprofit organization that is in the peace building realm. And when I talk peace building, what I mean by that is just what you said, Reverend Robert. It's restorative practices, restorative justice. And to me, I think social emotional learning for adults is just like paramount. There's a lot of programs out there for kids, but somebody has to teach them. And most of us never learned the skills of how to transform conflict, what to do when someone betrays you. I mean, like all of those things that deal with the emotions, right? What to do with strong emotions, anger, sadness, fear. You know, all of our emotions serve a purpose, but we don't generally learn what that is. So it's a new and emerging social science. And for me, it's like the intersection, right, of what we teach. We're science of mind. For me, this is the science of the heart. It's science of relationships. And so I'm really looking to bring it together and give us a larger presence in our day-to-day world. The work that I'm doing with Circle Up Center for Practical Peace Building is bringing restorative practices into our school system and our criminal justice system and our workplaces. I mean, that's the vision. It's not all happening now, but that's the big vision. And I expect, my hope is that some of those people will get turned on to the larger picture of consciousness and understanding that we're not victims of life, right? That we can be conscious creators, and that some of those folks will funnel into our centers and grow our movement at the same time, that we're actually boots on the ground, like doing things to create a world that works for everyone, not just talking about it, not just visioning it, but doing actual things that are going to create real and measurable results. So that's my soapbox. That's where I'm coming from.
As they say, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. Yes. I love this movement,
Yeah, and I love what you just said, because when I started looking at some of the intersections that Robert was talking about, in my other lifetime, I've done consciousness work, if you will, or spiritual work in some of the penitentiaries up in North Florida, up around and outside of Jacksonville. And then I've done some restorative justice work with adults in New York City with the Rites of Passage program. And here in Denver, I've worked with the restorative justice court system, working with young people who got caught up in different things. And the thing that you said that I wish I'd had when I was more involved with that arena, if you will, was the social emotional kind of things and skills that are available now that weren't available back then. Right. And one of the big things now, I think, in this social emotional arena is this whole idea of trauma, and that trauma gets lodged in the body. And if you don't know how to work through it with the restorative justice and the peace work, as we were talking and you were saying, dealing with the anger and the disappointments, it lodges in your body. And then it becomes, in my mind and from my little studies, it becomes like a ticking time bomb or a combination lock waiting for somebody to push the right numbers. And then this whole thing jumps out.
Yes. Yes.
So I'd be interested, if you shared some of the tools that are available now, that really work across the spectrum, not just in the restorative justice and the peace work, but it really sets the foundation for all of us to get over our trauma and dealing with some of these strong emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a tool. I want to share with you about something called ACEs. Are either of you familiar with ACEs?
I'm not.
It stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. Now, this information was not available. It wasn't out there when I was a psych major in college, many years ago. And this wasn't a thing. Even when I became a social worker, it just wasn't here until maybe 25 years ago was when the research started. So ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it came out of the work of two physicians, one who was working for Kaiser Permanente, the insurance company. So they had these clinics and they were running an obesity clinic. And one of these doctors was working in the obesity clinic with people who were at least 100 pounds overweight. And so doing psychosocials with these folks, he was finding some patterns, some things. And I think he had his light bulb moment when asking a woman who, I don't know, she weighed 300 plus pounds, how much she weighed at her first sexual experience. And she said something like 40 pounds. And he did like a double take. No, you didn't hear me right. I said your first sexual experience. And she said, well, 40 pounds. He was like, well, you would have had to have been a child. And she was. And so that was a light bulb moment. And he started to basically, they collected lots of data from people and found these 10 things that if you experienced it in childhood is a point. So now you'll be sitting here adding up your points, right? And I'm not sure I'll get all 10, but if you were physically abused as a child, it's a point. Now, you could have been beaten every day of your life, or you could have just gotten a few really good ones that you remember. It's just 1 point, right? So if you were physically abused, sexually abused, if there was emotional neglect, if a parent was incarcerated, if your parents went through divorce, if there was anyone in your home with mental illness or substance abuse, I'm missing some others. But anyway, you get.
Is there a financial one? Some
Well,
sort of
that is
money or
coming
financial?
out. Yeah, that has been part of the later research. So anyway, the physician from, and I can't remember, he was either Anda or Folletti, but from Kaiser, and then the other one was from the Centers for Disease Control. And so they created this survey. So the highest score you can get is a 10. And from the things that I named off from you, you know that it's a world of hurt. One of those things could be
more than enough,
right? One of those things could be highly traumatic.
Yeah.
So the next thing they did was then correlate those events with every dysfunction you could think of and physical stuff. So the more ACEs you have, the more likely you are to be a smoker, the more likely you are to be divorced, the more likely you are to have financial issues, to have trouble holding down a job, to abuse substances, to have to take antidepressants and medication in your 50s, on top of all the physical stuff. More likely to have heart attack, stroke, cancer. I mean, the list goes on, arthritis, everything. Right? And from our perspective, a science of mind perspective, it makes total sense.
Total sense.
Right?
And you know, that I would love to get some of that information, because it's fascinating to me, and I like to look at it, because I think, especially if you look into the underserved communities, wherever they are or however they look, I'm hearing you rattle those things off. I'm thinking, they probably start out day one with 3 of them points already on the list.
You got that
I
right.
don't know what the point count is to get you over some thing, but I mean, a lot of these young people and adults as well are already in that category right after they're born.
Yeah, they come into the world and they're already at a 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes, it is really, when you see the correlation, it is fascinating. And let me tell you, the one that really blew my mind. You know what COPD is?
Yes.
Right? Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. If you have an ACE score of, I think it's 4 or more, you are 400% more likely to have COPD as an adult. And I thought, boy, that's interesting. I could see like heart attack, cancer, like that stuff made sense. And I was just questioning, why COPD? And I asked a friend of mine who was a physical therapist, and she goes, that's easy. She's, what do you do when you're afraid? Right?
All day long. Oh, wow.
So imagine all day long, right? You're getting out of school. You don't know what's waiting for you around the corner. You don't know what's going to happen when you get home. I mean, all of this continually, like holding your breath, waiting. What's that other phrase we use? Waiting for the shoe to drop.
Right.
Right. And so people are holding their breath, and it imprints in your body. I don't have any empirical evidence for that, but it makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, and it's funny that you say that, because I was prematurely born by, I don't know, about a month. I was told I only weighed like 2 pounds or something when I was born. And back in that day, it's not like now. The neonatal care is, pretty advanced. I was put in an incubator. My uncle used to always teach me, you were just like a little chicken in that thing. And, but the idea of, preemies don't always have good respiratory systems because they haven't fully developed yet. So I can easily find myself holding my breath at times when certain things happen. And and like you said, I don't have any empirical evidence, but I believe that part of it is related to that. And so, when we look at the spiritual work of what we do in religious science of mind, a lot of the work, and not just there, but in a lot of the spiritual consciousness work, the whole idea of breathing exercises and how do we begin to transform out of a state of fear or anxiety or anxiousness into a more centered and relaxed state so that we can let things flow. And I would imagine, in your work, you've found out that those kinds of things really open up the space for people to talk about things or work through things. I'd just like to hear your idea on that.
You're absolutely right. I run circles. I do circles with groups, and probably the most profound work I've done is in the men's prison here where I live in Ocala, Marion Correctional. And I was led to that just volunteering. A friend of mine got a letter from a man who was incarcerated who wanted a Toastmaster group. And so she rounded up a dozen of her best friends, and we went in there to the prison, and it changed my life.
Yeah.
It changed my life. I never expected to do something like that. Now, another little thing, I don't know if we have this in common too, but I come from a family of law enforcement officers. My dad's a cop, or was a cop, retired now. My husband is a police officer, sheriff's deputy, and my daughter is an officer as well. So, it's just kind of funny, I think for me to be walking into a prison with all of these law enforcement, I've just been infused in it my whole life. Of course, I don't lead with that, but I let them get to know me a little bit first, but I teach a class and I'm there for an hour and a half with these guys. And I'm 5'2", I'm a small woman, and I'm in a class with these guys, some of whom, are in prison for life for really horrendous crimes, but they choose to be there. They choose to be in the circle. And so we meet for an hour and a half. I have, a class, like I know what I'm going to talk about. We're going to talk about power or respect, boundaries, what to do with difficult emotions. That every session starts with some kind of icebreaker, like get a feel for where you are, like what's happening in your body right now. What are you feeling? Yeah. And if you could call it the weather, is it a sunny day? What is it for you? I'll ask the two of you. Where are you right now?
Yeah.
Weather-wise, in your being.
It's funny that you say that, because one of my fathers, and my family was not law enforcement. Most of on my father's side, they were chefs. But my father would always say, when you ask him, how you doing today, Dad? He'd say, "Oh, I'm fair to partly cloudy." So that struck a chord, and it just reminded me of when I was doing work in the incarcerated system. I was a kid, basically. I was 22 years old. And I was rotating between the institutions in Stark, McClenny, and Rayford up in Jacksonville area, North Florida Panhandle. And it was I didn't have, I just basically went there trying to give some spiritual lessons, some ways of doing some introspective work and some reflective work to how to deal with whatever it is you had to deal with. Right. So this whole thing about social emotional education and makeup and nowhere near the platform. And so now it's so refreshing to hear that has expanded and it's doing really well. And as you said before, I think again for religious science of mind, we have a unique place with you. What this program is about. How do we begin to take these principles and put them into practice so that they become more than theoretical? They become more than conversational. And we begin to implement programs and tools, if you will, so that someone that's in an incarcerated place, whether they're in a physical incarcerated place or incarcerated in their own mind, so they can get some relief.
Yeah, because they learned that, that they were incarcerated in their minds before their bodies were incarcerated.
Yeah,
Right.
Yes.
I get that, Yeah, so we do an icebreaker. And by the way, what's your weather today, Reverend Robert?
It's interesting. As soon as you asked the question, I just started singing "Always Look on the Bright." But you guys don't want me to sing, so. But right now, things are really bright. I feel like I'm sitting under a bright blue sky, and things are clear, and things are sunny, and that's something I like to cultivate in my life, right? I know it's not there all the time, and but my internal weather absolutely bright and shiny and sunny today, and I think, like, as I'm listening, that has to be part of that skill, to be able to be in a room and be able to hold both the guy who's having a bright sunshiny day and another guy who's saying, "What are you talking about, man? This is not that. This is crappy over my perspective." And to be able to hold both of those folks equally in a circle,
Yeah.
in a room, in an experience. I've always believed we really come to learn these teachings, this philosophy, in the true application of interpersonal work,
Oh, yes.
being face to face, knee to knee, eyeball to eyeball with the people around us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the circle holds that space of tension.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's really valuable, I think, because people don't have these conversations on a day-to-day basis, right? Like, what does respect mean to you? How do you create boundaries? How do you step into your power? By the way, what does power mean? So these are the kind of conversations we're having. And every session, I have some kind of mindfulness activity.
Yeah.
We're either going to do some kind of a guided imagery, a meditation, something where they're just settling, going into the quiet and the silence. And for some of them, it's like the only opportunity, or the only time they're really even thinking about doing something like that. And then, I mean, we could be in a church. The prison walls, the barbed wire, all that stuff disappears for that moment, and we're all just human beings, having conversations about about life stuff that matters.
And the interesting thing I learned through that work is you get a real opportunity to be real, if you will, with people, because you're dealing with a population that, they're in a situation that uh, you either playing games, which may have been what got you into that situation, or you in a statement now where I need to be totally real here so I can move beyond this point to the next point, whatever that is, right? And so when you're interacting with them, their BS radar is really good. They can pick it up really easy. So
Yeah.
as I continue to do that work, it was a little scary, to be real, which I'm gonna is everywhere. But you begin to learn how to share experiences and make the contrast, so you can help one another and really release some of these barriers and anger and emotions that we have, to begin to make this world that works for everyone. Because you learn everybody has issues and emotions and things that they're
Yes.
continually working with. And when you can be real at that level, now you open up a whole new vista of what's possible.
Yeah. The best compliment I ever got, I think, working at the prison, and I don't he didn't even know he was giving me a compliment, was one of the guys asked me if I'd ever been in prison. And then he told his friend, so she knows. Like, she speaks like somebody who knows what this is. And I was like, wow, that's, because
Yes.
I connected, he
Yes.
could see me as a human being, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And so I talk about them when I'm out here, humanizing them. These are just human beings, just like you and me. And then I'm humanizing cops for them,
Yeah.
because they realize, like, in a very real way, oh, what, cops have daughters, and cops have mothers and wives and people that love them.
Yeah.
Right. You
You know,
can't lead going in the door with that, right?
correct.
I'm
I don't
married to
lead
a
with it.
cop, and I got a daughter. But after they've come to trust you, you then can help them to see that, yeah, well, wait a minute. that's something that struck me as I've learned more about your work, that really is important. And because just like that guy says, you get it. That's empathy. That's true understanding. That comes from a lot of listening and a lot of being really real and authentic with people. And I love that. Folks, if you're just tuning in or just watching, we've got Reverend Cindy Grimes with us here from Central Florida, a great and amazing, talented light. And Cindy, I want, while we've been talking, another colleague of ours, Reverend Ed Tanzi's been following along, and he mentions that we were talking about breathing a little earlier. He mentions that breathing was mentioned yesterday during your Sunday discussion. Please take a minute and help everybody understand a little bit more. What is it you do on Sundays? And then we'll tell people how they can find how to chime in and join you on Sundays.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So because we couldn't meet in person anymore from COVID, we just took our show online. And I really didn't like just talking to the camera. That was not fun for me. Some of my colleagues did that. They just kind of recreated Sunday morning on camera, and I couldn't do it. So it was just kind of a fluke. I invited a friend to just have a conversation with me, and it just took off. It was easy and natural and fun. So at 3:00 on Sunday afternoons, I have conversations with different people about this year. We're actually looking at the work of a woman named Valerie Kaur, whose book is See No Stranger, and the Revolutionary Love Project. Valerie is a peace activist. She's an attorney, civil rights attorney. She's written this amazing book, and she's a Sikh woman, right? She's of the Sikh faith.
Okay.
So she's made documentaries. I think the first thing that really put her on the map was a documentary she made right after 9/11. It was someone that she was close to that was the first Sikh American that was killed in retribution, right? 9/11, from people not even knowing that, oh, Sikhs are not Muslims. Anyway, craziness. But her book is phenomenal, See No Stranger. And it really is about loving ourselves, loving who we think of as other, and loving our opponents. An opponent could be anybody in the moment, right? Anybody who's opposed to what you want done. It implies not, a static, like you're always going to be my enemy or something, but just, sometimes my kid is my opponent. Sometimes my husband's my opponent. It just depends on what's going on. So she gives some real good strategies and ideas for how to love in all of those realms. And this month we're talking about loving ourselves. We've already been through loving others, loving opponents. Now we're talking about loving ourselves. And our topic for the month is breathe. The breath, right? So we take care of ourselves by taking that time to just breathe.
Yes. Folks, I love it when a guest sets us up for the perfect segue, because we're going to take a moment here to just breathe and be, and grab a drop of water and maybe a quick bio break, and let you learn just a little bit more about what we are and what we're doing here on the New Thought Media Network. This is New Thought Today. Happens every Tuesday. Give us, we're going to take about a minute and a half here. We'll be right back with more. Please stay with us. New Thought Today. We'll be right back. And welcome back, dear ones. Reverend Robert here with you. I've got my co-host, Reverend LZ Sekou here, and our special guest, Reverend Cindy Grimes, with us as well today. This is New Thought Today, and we've been talking today so far really around restorative justice and peacemaking. And before the break, we were just starting to get into that question of, okay, how do we make this really real? How do we get our hands a little dirty and get a little work going in here and bring us into a greater out picturing of the New Thought philosophy. So, Cindy, we'd love to hear from you. Share a little bit with us about your most current work and a little bit more about Circle Up.
Oh boy, my most current work. Well, let's see. I was introduced to peace building through an organization called the River Phoenix Center for Peace Building. And I did an immersion workshop with these folks that was like, I don't know, 6 days, the first half was. The day before going to this workshop, a young man, 19-year-old man, took a shotgun into the high school where my kids used to go to school. They'd already graduated, but he took the gun into the school. And thankfully, no one was really, I mean, someone did get hurt, actually. He fired the weapon and a bullet grazed a student. But it could have been, it could have been massive. And the whole county shut down. I mean, they shut down the interstate. They shut down everything. They shut down schools. There's a school probably 20 miles away from where the incident happened that was shut down. Like everything. I had friends whose kids were in school that day, and kids are hiding under desks. They're hiding in closets. They're calling their parents. They're throwing up in the bathroom because they're so terrified.
Right.
And they were in no danger. And this
right.
I'm just going to be straight up, right? So there's people who are like patting themselves on the back. What an awesome job they did in this scenario. And the teacher who talked this kid back, who brought him back into safety, right? He said, he threw the gun down. He said, "I need help." And this teacher knew him, had a conversation with him, was able to calm him down so the police officers could come and do their thing. And this woman was vilified for what she did because she stepped out of line, because I don't know what else. Maybe there was some other factors in there. But I was really blown away by that, because she really was the hero of that whole scenario.
Right.
And it was because of her relationship with this young man. And because it didn't turn into this big shoot 'em up, or, the police got all the accolades, as they should get some, but I felt like she should have been recognized. And the skills, what it took for her to be able to do that, is something that we can all tap into. Right. So the next day I'm in this workshop learning about restorative justice. I had never heard of that before. I didn't know what it was. Heart Phoenix suggested, "You've got this Center for Spiritual Living. Why don't you have a Center for Peace Building?" What are you talking about? What is that? What does that mean? And so I spent the next days finding out what that meant. I took their curriculum, social emotional learning curriculum they were using with youth, and that was what I taught at Marion Correctional to those guys.
Wow.
And so, seeing the transformation and what happened for those men in that journey of our 12 to 14 weeks together was just amazing. And one after another would say, "If I just learned this stuff in school, or if I just learned this when I was a kid, I wouldn't be here." Right. And I know that from ACEs because I taught them about that too. Right? They learned about that. How many? Oh, that's another. I didn't tell you about that correlation.
Right.
A third of our population has 0 ACEs.
Okay.
Think about that, right? A third of people across the country, the United States, have not experienced any of those adversities. Not to say they haven't experienced some adversity. We all have, right? But when you look at kids in detention centers, or you look at people in prison, instead of the curve going like this, or it would be the other way around. Like, most people don't have ACEs. In prison, it's the other way around. Most people do have ACEs. You don't find people in prison that have 0s.
Right.
Right.
Hardly ever. In fact, most of the kids that are in detention have 5 or more ACEs. And so these are kids that are acting out because of things that have happened to them. They don't know what to do, right? They've got all these feelings and all these unmet needs and all these things, and it shows up in behavior. And so they misbehave. They don't stay in the box. And what happens? We add insult to injury, incarcerate them, brutalize them more,
right,
push them aside, expel them from school, from whatever. And these are the people that are hurting the most. So like, this is where my heart is, to get people to understand that this punitive way of dealing with issues, with behavior, is not working. It's not effective. In fact, it's adding insult to injury and making a bad situation even worse.
Yeah.
So now, we have alternatives. They're in some ways, it's like we teach new thought. It's new thought, ancient wisdom. It's been here forever, right? But we have this new thought spin. It's the same thing with restorative practices. Restorative practices comes from sitting around in circle with people. It's indigenous practice.
Yes.
People in from every part of the world have done that for millennia. We sit in circle around the campfire. We talk things out. That's what we have done. Now we live in a society where, people are looking at their phones or the screen, right? And so, so that's kind of my crusade, if you want to call it that, is just to get this out there, especially in New Thought communities, because we come from this orientation of oneness. When I look at you, I'm looking at the face of God. Right? When you look at me, it's the same. We are one. We are all expressions of the divine. At least we know that in our heads. We know that in theory. So now it's time, let's bring it into the heart and really know that and share that and help people understand that.
Well, the important thing you said there for me, and I think is the cornerstone of all of it, you said relationships. That for this to work, for this to people have to get out of their heads and begin to build relationships so I can be open with you. I can be honest with you. And we can really talk things through, because I don't have to tell you what, I can explain the situation the way it really is and not try to figure out if you're going to like it this way. So no, I'll change it. No, I can't use that word. And then by the time I actually deliver something, it's all convoluted. The person didn't get the message, any of that. But if I have a real relationship with you, I'm going to respect you as a person, but I can deliver a real message to you that you hear. Now, you may get mad. Yeah, you may even stomp around for a minute. But once you understand that we have a relationship, I care about you, you care about me, now we can begin to build real progress and build these relationships, as you were saying, that was key for me, of making this circle go round.
Yeah.
And that's what we need. But given all the stuff we're dealing with today, we need a bunch of circles going around continuously.
We do.
Many years ago, when I was in the snow sport industry, we had a saying, and this is directly relating to people. They will never care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right.
And so any interpersonal peace building, community building, all of these aspects, we've got to be able to lead with, I care about you first. I care about your well-being. I care about your mental health. I care about your emotional health, your spiritual health. I care about all of you. Then we can move forward towards the dream, towards the vision, a world that works. Even people incarcerated have that ability to create a world that works for them.
Yeah.
They still have boundaries they have to live within, just like the rest of it. They still have certain, very dramatic limitations they have to live within, but we still have the ability to create a world that works within our surroundings.
And they do. They do. I thought when I went in there and was teaching this work, First, I was at the work camp, which is the short time guys, right? They're like, 10 years or less. And I thought, well, that's cool. I can do that because I can be hopeful. And then I was invited to go to the main unit where they're lifers. And I really had to sit with that because I thought, I don't know if I can give you any hope. And I don't want to go in there and not feel hopeful for you. Mm-hmm. And I realized that very quickly, I realized that the stuff that I was teaching them wasn't for some time in the future. It was for them right in the moment, in their day-to-day interactions with one another, whether they were getting out of prison or not. This is stuff that we all can use, that we all need. I mean, another one of my motivations, frankly, is I have people that are on the other side of the political spectrum from me. Very dear people, my family members that I love. And I know there's lots of people that say, well, they don't believe this, or if they believe that, I'm writing them off, and you don't see it. And I can't do that. I don't want to do that. I choose not to. So this is part of my inner journey for how do I be in relationship with people I care about that are very, very different than me philosophically. And, and create this world that works for everyone. Because here's another aha moment I got from River Phoenix, that from that training, was that peace is not the absence of conflict. Conflict is always going to be there. Peace is being able to deal with the conflict in ways that are nonviolent.
Right.
Right. So, and that was like a weight lifted, like, oh, wait a minute. You mean I don't have to be nicey nice all the time and we don't have to always get along? Like, that doesn't feel realistic to me. Right.
Right.
But to think, yeah, we don't have to get along. We don't even have to really like each other. But, right.
And every time I hear a story like that, I think about a phrase that Alan Watts always used in some of his lectures. He said, right now, in everyone that's alive, there's a war going on in your body. The white blood cells are making sure that nothing foreign comes in there and disrupts the harmony and balance, and that's trying to go on. So from that perspective, this thing that's doing some attacking is not a bad thing. It's the way things are. So I can be mad and then resolve the issue. I can be upset or scared or afraid and resolve the issue. And so when we talk about restorative justice, in my mind, one of the key things is we're trying to reconcile opposites. We're trying to look at a thing that has been divided, and it could be many degrees of division, but we're trying to bring that perspective back so we realize it is a whole thing, and people can align themselves at various points along that thing, whether it's a line or a circle, however you want to perceive it, and be able to reconcile those differences so that there is peace.
Right. So I want to give you like a process, but to tell you first that this idea of restorative justice is there's a scale. There is restorative justice in very informal conversation. I wouldn't say restorative justice, restorative practices.
Yes.
Restorative justice is under the umbrella of restorative practices. So you can have restorative conversations, you can have restorative spaces, but this idea of restorative justice is a process that's used when there's been a harm, right? Somebody commits a crime, there's some kind of wrongdoing that happens. So you've got the person that is responsible for causing the harm, and you have the one that was impacted. And you ask them to come to the table in a facilitated conversation with their support people, right? So if it's a juvenile, for example, who's committed a crime, they might have their parents there, they might have the principal, a guidance counselor, someone like that. As well as the person who they cause the harm to, and whoever their support people are.
Right.
And the facilitator guides the discussion, and it revolves around 4 questions. Now, there's a lot of prep that goes into it. You just don't dive into a conversation like this, right? You want to get people ready and make sure that they want to be there.
Right.
Make sure that they want to make the relationship better. Right. So think about this. You can use this in any relationship, relationship, right? When there's been a harm. Number 1 question, what happened? So you ask the question of each person, and in circle, one person speaks at a time, right? You've got the talking stick and you explain from your perspective what happened. And that in itself can change everything, right? It's like having a 360 camera that's catching all the different views of what happened. You think you know, but you didn't know what it looked like from that end, right? So what happened? The next question is, what was the impact? And what were you thinking? Like, what was going on for you when this happened? So everyone gets to speak about that from their perspective. The third question is, how do we make things right? What do we need to do to bring that restoration? Can we do that? And then the last question is, how do we keep this from happening again? And that's it. That's it. In its most formal, there'll be contracts. You know, there may be performance agreements. In some places, they actually use this as a diversion type program for kids who are coming into the system rather than give them a record. If you go through this circle, you face the person you harmed, you do what it takes to make this right, you're not going to have a record.
Right.
Right? It's phenomenal. And do you think that a kid who has to look somebody in the eye and say, geez, I'm really sorry I stole your car and wrecked it. And by the way, I'm willing to, you know, I'm going to mow grass. I just got a job, whatever I need to do to, you know, to take care of this.
Yeah.
You think they're going to go out and commit a crime like that again?
Chance is going to go down.
The private prison system doesn't like this, do they?
I don't know. It is, like I said, there's a whole spectrum of how it's being used. This can be used as preventive stuff in a classroom. You can teach this to kids.
That's what I like.
Little kids.
Well, go ahead, Robert.
I was just gonna say that's what I like is let's get this in the hands of younger and these type of practices. So right, not just restorative practices, the gamut of them, into the hands of as many young kids as we can, into the hearts and the mind of these young kids, so they can use this stuff, grow up with this stuff, rather than trying to have intervention at the last minute before, like, I don't want this to be the last option before we lock the door on an 8 or a 12 or a 14 or a 16-year-old. Yeah. Let's get to them when they're 5 and 6 and 8 and 10. And what do we got to do there, Cindy? What can we do there?
Well, I don't know if either of you have heard this statistic, and I can't tell you where it came from, but I have heard it in multiple places that that states decide how many prisons they need, how many prison beds, based on how many kids are failing or can't read in the second grade. Wow. Have you heard that?
No.
Yeah, it's something I've heard for years. I'll have to track it down because I don't want to, but that is what they say. If a kid is failing, can't read in second grade, then you can pretty much guarantee that they're going to end up behind bars.
And
that to me is so unconscionable.
Yeah.
You know, why are we not? And then this represents the paradigm shift, right? Instead of saying these kids are going to end up in prison, we say, okay, we identify you, we see you. What are we going to do to keep you from ending up in prison?
Right.
And you know, that hit home for me because my mother died when I was in first grade. So when I got to second grade, I didn't want to hear anything from anybody. So my reading comprehension and all that stuff was way down. So had they picked me as one of those second graders who couldn't read or wasn't proficient at reading, I was automatically off on a tangent. And so as opposed to, you know, looking at other statistics or accumulating other statistics on that, how do we help that? And that's what this, I'm hearing you say, the Restorative Justice Project, when we start them early, however we can get them, is to, if we look at the ACEs, if that kid is not doing X at second grade, why? What ACEs pieces, if you will, are being impacted? And can we mitigate them or can we restore them so that kid whole?
Yeah, and let me make sure I mention this. I'm glad I still have time because we know about ACEs, right? The adverse childhood experiences, but we also know that there are positive experiences that a child can have that can mitigate those circumstances and allow them to turn that hot mess, into something wonderful, right?
Right.
And so that's been really my part of my life journey. It was, should I share that? I guess I could share that story, Robert,
Sure.
if you have
Absolutely.
time.
Yes.
Okay, so defining moment for myself. I was 24, I think, years old, and I was working as a victim advocate in the state attorney's office. And so I was working with crime victims of all kinds, domestic violence, sexual assaults, all this stuff. And I get sent to a training in a treatment facility for sex offenders, right? A prison, they're not getting out. I don't know what kind of treatment they were getting, but anyway. Facilitator stands in the middle of the room. This side has 60 sex offenders. This side of the room has therapists, social workers, doctors, nurses, etc., about the same number. And she stands in the middle and she looks at this side of the room and she asks, by show of hands, how many of you were abused as children? And what do you guess, right? Based on the stats I just gave you, almost all the hands go up. Yep. Then she looks on this side of the room and she says, by show of hands, how many of you were abused as children? Now I'm 24 years old. My ACE is I have a 4. And I had never divulged, I'd never shared anything of some of the things that happened to me in childhood. And when she asked that question, almost every hand went up on that side of the room. And I about fell out because I was in my own isolation, my own shame, my own drama, like all of that. So I made some decisions out of that experience. Number one, I don't want to see anybody have to be in this room if I can do something about that. Number two, what made the difference? How did I end up on this side and not that side? Right. What? So that was, a 25 year journey of all that work in social services and hospice and all those different things, trying to figure out the answer to that. And now I think we have it. I really think we have it. If you could boil it, it's a lot of things, but if you could boil it down to one, it is the quality of our social connections. If you have one person in your life that can show you another possibility, if you have one person in your life who believes in you, if you have that soft shoulder to cry on, somebody who's going to wrap their arms around you and take care of you when you're going through those tough times, you can come out on the other side of that. You can, and people do all the time.
Yep.
I look at myself, and after I learned about ACEs, I was like, go girl, you made it. Like I didn't end up in prison. I didn't end up, using drugs, like so many other things I could have done. And I came out on the other side instead of feeling like, broken. What's wrong with me? Yeah. Staying in that victim mode. It was like, well, shoot, this would have happened to anybody. I could have been way worse off than I am.
Yeah.
Right?
Beat the odds for sure, right?
Yeah. But we all have that capacity. We can be that person for somebody else.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. I'm struck. This is big brothers, big sisters, right? It's part of why programs like that work. Whatever that if you one positive childhood experience offsetting the ACE, there is the option. There's the opportunity to be that PCE instead of ACE, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And now I feel like my work is moving people from one side of the room to the other. Yeah. At least metaphorically, right? If not actually, but for people to realize that they can use their pain and their wounds and their traumas as their like exercise equipment, like this is going to make me stronger. This is going to make me better. And this is going to let me live my mission and purpose and lift other people at the same time that I'm coming up.
Well, folks, before we go today, we want to make sure that you understand how to stay in touch with Reverend Cindy. Now, we've pulled your website up here. This is a great place to go because you can jump off into any of the different work that Reverend Cindy is doing. Also tabs for her programs. events that she does, and of course a contact. You can sign up, get on her mailing list, and join and stay in touch with what she's doing. And let me make sure I have the right URL there. It's cindycgrimes.com. I will make sure to drop that in the comments of today's show. And please know, we would love to hear from you as well. Please let us know if you have questions for Reverend Cindy or anything else that you'd like to share. If we don't get to them here, we'll make sure to answer anything, and any comments you add, we'll respond to those afterwards in another time, on another day, on another afternoon. So, Reverend Cindy, before we go though, anything super special, anything in the people just have to know about before we're done here today?
Well, thank you for showing the website. And I've created these classes. That course that I taught at the prison, I have that. And I would love to share that with spiritual communities. I'm trying to figure out how to, to market it, to create it, to get it out there so that folks can create peace building centers in their communities. Mm-hmm. What if, as Seventh-day Adventists have hospitals and Catholics have Catholic charities, what if New Thought communities could be known as the peace builders? Right? What if that was our work in the world?
I like it.
Imagine that.
All right, you're going to start signing some people up, I'm sure about that. So, well, I do hope that you'll come back and visit us again.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was awesome. I didn't know what to expect today. I didn't know what we were going to talk about, but thank you for letting me share my passions. And I hope some people see some work for them, something for them in this idea to really move this work forward.
Yeah, I do believe people will be inspired. So, and that's the way we like it. We don't like to give people a lot of direction. We like to see where Spirit takes it all. It took us, I think, in a fabulous direction today. So again, thank you for being with us. Folks, for those of you that are watching, please hit that share button. Let your friends know what's going on. If you're watching this on a rebroadcast, feel free to chime in and share your thoughts and feelings as well. All your comments will be included, and we respond to those at any time as we can. This is New Thought Today. We're here every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. Please be sure to keep on coming back. If you'd like to get involved in the conversation, we have a great email address, ministertalk@ntmedia.org. That's ministertalk@ntmedia.org. That goes to Reverend LZ and I. And again, we'll be willing, absolutely get back to you on that. Before we go, we do have a history of final thoughts. So let's start with Reverend Cindy, and then we'll go to Rev Z today. Reverend Cindy, final thoughts.
Oh, gratitude for this platform, gratitude for meeting Reverend Z today, and just gratitude for you, Reverend Robert.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
And my parting words is excitement. Having done some of this work a while back and now seeing how it's transformed, and I will definitely be getting in touch with you, Reverend Cindy, to see what kind of other connections and intersections we have going on, to see what we can do to make peace centers at Centers for Spiritual Living. I like that.
Absolutely. And, I can't help but think that all we really got to do is look on the bright side of life. Enough of that. Until next week. Peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings.